The Freeman, 19th of September 2023, the U.S. is working with Vietnam and India to oppose China. The Mutual Enemies Conversation. Senate Majority Leader Charles Schumer is scheduled to travel to China this autumn with senators from both parties. The trip is intended to strengthen ties between the United States and China, much like previous trips to China by senior American officials. The two economic giants are becoming more tense, which is why there are attempts to improve diplomatic ties between the U.S. and China. To curtail Beijing's influence, they also coincide with U.S. initiatives to fortify relations with Indo-Pacific nations. Consider President Joe Biden's September 2023 trips to Vietnam and India for the G20 conference, where Biden's discussions centered on the United States' confrontation with China. Biden struck several agreements in supply chain security, research, and technology in Asia to improve U.S. ties with Vietnam and India. Shortly after meeting with the head of Vietnam's Communist Party, the president of Vietnam told reporters in Hanoi on September 10, 2023, "I don't want to contain China." The following day, at a think tank event in New York City organized by the Council on Foreign Relations, U.S. Representatives Mike Gallagher and Raja Krishnamurthy expressed similar views. Although it may not be the official objective of the United States, its recent accords with Vietnam, India, and other nations might effectively curtail China's worldwide influence. Significance of U.S.-led G20 agreements for China. International loans are one of China's most effective tools of influence, and the U.S. is aggressively seeking methods to curb them. The United States promised to assist in reforming the World Bank and International Monetary Fund to provide them greater flexibility in financing poor nations to finance renewable energy, climate mitigation, and vital infrastructure projects during the G20 summit held in New Delhi on September 9 to 10. To enable those reforms, Biden first committed $25 billion. Over the following 10 years, he gained further financial commitments from other nations, amounting to $200 billion in new support for poor countries. In addition, the United States and the European Union inked an agreement to facilitate rail and port connections between the Middle East, Europe, and Asia. Biden called the rail and ports agreement a real big deal, stating that it would contribute to the integration and stabilization of the Middle East. These programs aim to offer a substitute for China's Belt and Road Initiative. The initiative, often called the Belt and Road Initiative, is China's international infrastructure lending scheme. Chinese companies, banks, and government agencies have given over $1 trillion in loans to other countries over the last 10 years. As a result, 60% of the recipient nations are currently in debt to these Chinese organizations. America and other nations have long denounced the BRI as debt-trap diplomacy. A study indicates that China's government and quasi-government entities lend trillions of dollars to other countries for infrastructure, usually resulting in unmanageable debt for the borrowing nations. Large-scale foreign project funding may become increasingly challenging for Chinese firms as the country struggles with a declining home economy. The new G20 accords spearheaded by the United States may fill the upcoming void. These G20 proposals are in addition to current Western economic initiatives aimed at competing with the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. These projects include trade agreements between the United States and the Americas, the EU's Global Gateway, and the G7's Global Infrastructure and Investment Partnership. What China stands to gain from the US-India Pact. Biden and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi decided to intensify their cooperation on developing key and emerging technologies, including quantum computing and space exploration, as well as 5G and 6G telecommunications, during their meeting on the fringes of the G20. This will enable India to compete with China in the Indo-Pacific technical market. In a joint statement, Biden and Modi mentioned the U.S.'s Rip and Replace program in the telecommunications section. The goal is to assist smaller telecom companies in obtaining network equipment from Western suppliers to safeguard consumer data rather than relying on Chinese companies such as Huawei or ZTE. Because it believes that Huawei and ZTE threaten national security, the United States has prohibited their equipment from being used on its networks. China's proliferation of telecommunications technology is directly opposed by the United States and India's commitment to support rip and replace. What China stands to gain from the US-Vietnam agreement. In Vietnam, a nation that has long regarded China as its primary commercial partner, Biden expanded the bilateral relationship to a complete strategic alliance encompassing economics, education, and technology. The United States will contribute $2 million to support instructional labs and training programs for semiconductor assembly, testing, and packaging as part of the expanded collaboration. Vietnam will receive assistance from the U.S. artificial intelligence company NVIDIA in integrating AI into its automotive and healthcare systems. 2 companies in Arizona and 2 in California have already committed to establishing semiconductor factories and design centers in Vietnam. Because of all these investments, Vietnam will become even more appealing to American and Western businesses who don't want China to be the only supplier for their supply chain. China's market dominance and technological edge in the region will decline as Vietnam emerges as a significant participant in the semiconductor industry. Additionally, the United States committed to giving Vietnam around $9 million to support border patrols, increased port facility security, and increased efforts to combat illegal, unreported, and unregulated IUUF fishing. The initiative's goal is China, even if it isn't stated directly. Chinese industrial fishing vessels are the primary source of UF worldwide, and China and Vietnam are still at odds over disputed claims to the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea. The United States expanded its network of allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific region that can assist in counterbalancing China by signing these agreements during the G20 in Vietnam and India. The United States is forming partnerships throughout Asia, in addition to Vice President Kamala Harris's comparable diplomatic achievements at the most recent ASEAN summit in Indonesia, security alliances such as AUKUS, which unites the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom, and the Quad, which connects the United States, India, Australia, and Japan, increased military sales and training to Taiwan, and the most recent Camp David meeting that Vice President Biden convened with South Korea and Japan. These steps limit China's military, economic, and political power, even though American officials don't state this clearly. Rhetoric aside, deeds always speak louder than words.